Hello everyone. So I think we waited few minutes. We can start now. If anybody else are joining, they can join. So I hope I'm audible. Please someone let me know whether I'm audible or not. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I hope my presentation is visible. Can somebody let me know? Is my presentation visible? Okay. So I think it's better if you guys, turn on your mic and let me know because when I'm in the presentation mode, I won't be able to check with the messages here in the chat box. So, anyways, this is supposed to be like an interactive session. So, please turn on your mics and be vocal. Okay. So, I think it's visible now, so we shall start. So, welcome to NPTEL course Experimental Biotechnology by Professor Vishal Trivedi, IIT Guwahati, and I am one of your TA, Sumati from University of Hyderabad, and this is my email ID for your reference. So for the week 2, we will go through the topics from the questions first. And like since last time, few of you asked like couple of experiments or the concept of the procedures that has been taught during the week. So we after we finish the assignment topics, we shall move on to that as well. So anytime anybody has any doubt, can turn on your mic and let me know because as I said, I won't be able to look into the Google Meet chat box when I'm in the presentation mode. Okay. So let's start. So the first topic is regarding the electrophoretic mobility. So this week the topics that were covered was electrophoresis, basics of electrophoresis and horizontal electrophoresis. So all the questions are regarding that, and then we'll also be looking into the basics of electrophoresis and vertical and horizontal electrophoresis later. So the first is electrophoretic mobility. So electrophoretic mobility describes, just a second. Yeah. So the electrophoretic mobility describes how fast a charged particle. So basically, electrophoresis is dependent on the charge of the particles for its mobility. And it's from your positive, negative, you have your electrodes, and your negatively charged particles move towards your positive electrode, and that's how the separation occurs of various particles in a given mixture of sample. So basically, we do electrophoresis for protein, DNA, or sometimes ions. So in case of protein, it is your polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis, and in case of DNA, we perform agarose gel electrophoresis. So electrophoretic mobility is very important because that is what determines the movement, and that is what will help your uh, resolution resolving of your sample properly. So this is how fast a charged particles moves through a medium when an electric field is applied. So basically, we use this in gel electrophoresis and as well as capillary electrophoresis. So electrophoretic mobility is inversely proportional to the size of the molecule. That is, your smaller molecules will basically move faster and your larger molecules will move relatively slower than the smaller ones. So it is directly proportional to the charge of the particle and inversely proportional to the size of the molecule. So the larger molecules experience more friction with the surrounding medium. So this slows down their movement or their electrophoretic mobility. Then electrophoretic mobility is also inversely proportional to the viscosity of the medium in which the sample is being run. So a more viscous medium creates more resistance generally. So that is how it works, because if your medium is viscous, there is again more friction. So there is resistance. So it creates more resistance to the movement of the charged molecules. So while shape can also influence the mobility, that is also due to the friction, that is due to the difference in the frictional coefficients. The primary determinant is, however, the net charge of the molecule. For instance, the globular proteins, they are, as the name suggests, they're globular or more spheroid in shape. So they typically have faster mobility than the fibrous proteins. So even though they are of similar size, if the shape of the molecule is globular, they can move faster than the linearized form of the same protein. This is because it is packed very compactly, which helps its movement. So that is why when we also run the plasmids on the Gross gel, we get three different bands. Like we get the circular band, we get the nicked form, we get the linearized form. So everything is at different size, even though they are all of the same molecule. So, however, the shape effects in case of the electrophoretic mobility is secondary. First comes the charge, and then it depends on the shape as well. So, the mobility is directly proportional to the charge, inversely proportional to the size, inversely proportional to the viscosity of the medium, and the shape also to a certain extent affects the or influences the electrophoretic mobility. So I hope this part is clear. So coming to the next one, it was regarding ammonium persulfate, or APS abbreviated as. So this is one of the components that is used to make polyacrylamide gels. So polyacrylamide gels are made of both acrylamide and bisacrylamide, and that the polymerization starts because of the cross linking, and then different sizes of based on the percentage of the acrylamide used, you have different pore size in each percent of the gel. So this helps in uh, resolving different sizes of proteins. So here we also use ammonium persulfate. So ammonium persulfate is used in acrylamide polymerization to start the polymerization process, or that is to initiate it. And how this happens is by generation of free radicals. So this free radicals then will trigger a chain reaction which helps in the formation of the polyacrylamide polymer. So that is the role of APS in preparation of polyacrylamide gels. So this APS is basically helping in polymerization in a way by initiation of the process, that is by generating free radicals. That is the main purpose of APS. So pH, the APS does not really help in maintaining pH. pH is basically maintained by the buffers. So while maintaining proper pH, it is important for acrylamide polymerization. The buffers that are typically added separately to control the pH during the polymerization helps it. So we have two parts of gel, that is your stacking gel and your resolving gel. So each is made in a different pH. Your stacking will be made in 6.8 pH buffer, tris buffer, and your resolving will be made in 8.8 tris buffer. So the pH maintenance is maintained by these buffers and also the tris that is added in your running buffer. Then cross-linking and acrylamide polymerization. So cross-linking is usually by addition of a cross-linking agent, which is nothing but bisacrylamide. So your acrylamide to bisacrylamide ratio is 1 is to 30. That is one part of bis in 29 parts of acrylamide. So this is the one which helps in cross-linking and not APS. APS initiates the polymerization, but the cross-linking is because of bisacrylamide. So APS initiates the polymerization while the bisacrylamide forms the cross links between the polymer chains of acrylamide. Then the negative charge on the proteins is uh, by the SDS that we use in the SDS page. So SDS is nothing but sodium dodecyl sulfate, which is a detergent. So it imparts negative charge to the proteins. It is also present in the sample preparation buffer, that is your lamellae buffer, and it is also present in your gels while preparation, and it is also present in the running buffer as well. So it is called SDS buffer or SDS page running buffer. So SDS is present in every part of the preparation. So SDS is the one that imparts the negative charge. So this negative charge will then help the proteins to run towards the positive electrode. Then ammonium persulfate is used along with timid. So we use basically we use tris buffer, we use acrylamide, which is a mixture of acrylamide and bisacrylamide itself, and then we use APS, we use SDS, and then we use timid. So APS with TEMID helps in the polymerization process. Here APS is your initiator and TIMID is your catalyst. So your catalyst is nothing but it fastens the process of this. So as your TEMID acts as a catalyst for polymerization of acrylamide while preparing the SDS page gel electrophoresis. So this is the structure of ammonium persulfate. So this is very important because this is how you can quickly help initiate the polymerization process. If you do not add this, your gel polymerization will not take place. So timid helps in fastening the process by acting as a catalyst, and SDS will impart negative charge to the sample, that is your protein. So this was about APS, and next is TIMID. So as we discussed, TIMID is a catalyst, so it accelerates the polymerization process. So TIMID is NNN tetramethyl ethylene diamine. So this helps by activating the initiator, which is nothing but ammonium persulfate, and then ammonium persulfate produces radicals, free radicals, which initiate the polymerization process. So once it has been initiated, the polymerization is a chain reaction which continues further. Then while TEMED is crucial for the polymerization process, it does not directly initiate this. So without TEMED also your polymerization will begin because your ammonium persulfate will slowly start producing free radicals. TEMED is only there to accelerate the process. The initiator is the compound that generates the free radicals, which is APS, and TEMED is the catalyst which accelerates the reaction. So cross-linking is achieved by addition of bisacrylamide and not TEMED. So TEMED's role is to catalyze the polymerization of the acrylamide and bisacrylamide monomers to form a polymer network, which will have even-sized pores in the gel depending on the percentage of the acrylamide we use. Then in polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis, also known as PAGE, acrylamide and bisacrylamide form a gel matrix through polymerization. This process requires free radical initiator system, which is your APS, and your catalyst is your TEMID. So this is your structure of TEMID. Then moving on. So next is regarding SDS PAGE, which stands for sodium didecyl sulfate polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis. So SDS, like we discussed, is an anionic detergent that binds to the proteins, and it gives a strong negative charge which allows their separation based on the molecular weight in a gel. So agarose electrophoresis, it is used, and this technique is primarily used to separate. So, in case of polyacrylamide electrophoresis, SDS is used. In case of others, SDS is not used because it does not require it, or it has been substituted to some by some other thing. So in case of agarose gel electrophoresis, which is for DNA and RNA, we do not generally use SDS. And in case of native page, this method separates the proteins on their native charge and size without denaturing them with SDS. So SDS, as I said, is also a detergent. So it also denatures the proteins. So native page is generally done for uh, the native structure of the protein, for preserving the native structure of the protein. So like the name suggests, the folded form of the protein or without any bond breakage. Sometimes to maintain the activity of the protein, you run native page. So in that case, if you add SDS, it will denature the protein into its linear form or its simpler form, and its 3D native form will not be present. So in case of native page, SDS is not used. And there is also urea page. So here in this technique, it is used to denature the proteins. Urea is used instead of SDS. So depending on your need, like for the reason behind running the sample, then further downstream processing, how you will be doing, whether you will be going for western blot or whether you have to purify your sample again, whether you want to check the monomeric or oligomeric nature of the protein, whether it's a tetramer, hexamer, or trimer. So, depending on all these things, you will choose which type of electrophoresis you want to run, whether it is STS page, that is your reducing environment, or your non reducing environment, like native page, or agarose gel for your nucleic acid samples, and urea page, where you denature your proteins but with urea instead of SDS. So here we can see initially your proteins will be in a mixture like this, with all the sizes randomly present in the sample solution. And once you apply electric field and you start running your gel, then your lower molecular weights, you can see, all are imparted with negative charge in case of SDS page. So by SDS. And so all the negatively charged particles will move towards your positive electrode. But you can see it is not only charge, it is size based separation because of the porosity of the gel or percentage of the gel that you use. So your smaller molecular weight proteins will run farthest. It will be running first because it has least friction, it has least resistance, and it is very small and it can easily travel through the pores. And then based on the size in descending or in ascending order, your other proteins will follow these. So, depending on the molecular weight, higher molecular runs slower and lower molecular weight proteins runs faster. So, here you can see this is how the protein bands look on a gel. So you can see different sizes have been resolved at different levels in the gel based on their molecular weight. So you can see your 6.5, 14.3, 21, 29, 45, 67, 100, and 200 based on their molecular size, how they have been resolved. So this is your ladder and this is your protein. So you can have different proteins at different range. So you also add a protein ladder which has a standard marking of the molecular weights. So you can easily identify the protein which resolves along with it in the same line will correspond to the same molecular weight. So this was regarding the use of SDS in page electrophoresis. So next is native page. So native page, like I said, is done for the native structure of the protein, to preserve the native structure, and it is a technique used to separate the proteins in their native folded state, preserving their biological activity. So unlike in SDS page, where it denatures your protein into its linearized form, it does not involve denaturing agents like SDS, allowing the protein to interact and have enzymatic activity. So your native structure is usually due to the interactions between different regions of the protein within itself. You can see here the structure of the protein. These are the same proteins. Here it is completely linear, but here you can see it is folded in a certain conformation. So this is the native conformation of the protein, and how it maintains the native conformation is by interacting with particular regions in the protein. Like this region interacts with this, and then this region interacts here, and then this region interacts here, so which ultimately results in a proper biologically active conformation of the protein. So sometimes what happens is there might be different peptides present in the protein, or there might be interactions between two proteins. So you can see there are two peptides here, the yellow and the red one. So the two peptides are also in their native conformation, and they are also linked with each other. That is, they are also interacting with each other. So this sort of native form of the protein will also be preserved in case of native page. If you use SDS, this will be denatured into this sort of linearized forms. So in SDS page, you run your linear form of proteins, and in case of your conventional native page, you run your biologically active folded state of the protein. So this allows us to study the protein interactions and enzymatic activity. In contrast to native page, SDS page uses a strong anionic detergent to denature the proteins and coat them with negative charges, allowing for separation primarily based on size. This denaturation disrupts the protein's 3D structure and it affects its biological activity. Then, since native page does not use SDS or any other strong denaturing agents, the protein's charge is determined by its inherent amino acid composition rather than being artificially conferred by a detergent. So, since you're not adding any sort of anionic detergent or any sort of anionic charge imparting reagent into it, the overall net charge of your protein is what decides its charge even while running in the gel. So based on its charge, the internal charge of the protein, your native proteins will be resolving in their electrophoretic speed in the gel. Then we have loading dice. Like I said, uh, in case of native page, the loading diaries are designed to minimize protein denaturation. So, like I said, in the lamellae buffer, which is used for sample preparation, in case of SDS page, we also add SDS in the buffer. But here, in case of native page, even in the buffer, we do not use any sort of SDS, so that we maintain the uh, native form of the protein without denaturing it. So this is to a maximum possible extent, we will avoid any sort of denaturing agents or denaturing conditions. Usually we also heat the samples, so here we won't be doing such kind of denaturing processes because we have to run the native form of the gel, native form of the protein in the gel. So loading dyes used in native page are designed to minimize protein denaturation and typically do not contain harsh detergents like SDS. While not guaranteed in all cases, the absence of denaturation in native page means the protein's activity is more likely to be preserved when compared to SDS page. So anything is not 100% as you know. So we try to minimize the denaturation in all sort of possible ways. So most likely we expect that most of the protein's activity will be retained. Sometimes some protein might be very sensitive to any sort of distortion from the physiological condition, so they might not have that activity even if you're running in a native page. But most of the proteins which are general and which do not have any complicated regions or which do not have any sensitive uh, environmental condition requirement, those sorts of other than those sorts of proteins, other proteins, they will be in the native form and their activity will be preserved. So this basically allows us to study the protein in its functional state under its native state. So you can see here how you have your linearized denatured form of proteins in SDS page, and you have your conventional native structures in your native page. So obviously, because the native structure is more complicated or artificially anionic charge is not imparted, so the time required to run a native gel is also relatively much higher than the time required to run SDS page. So SDS page will be usually done by within 2 hours or even within 90 minutes depending on the size of the protein you are trying to resolve, and your native page usually takes more time, like 4 to more than 4 hours, depending on again the native form of it, the oligomeric nature of it, and the negative charge, the total charge that it carries. So, depending upon what type of protein you want, what type of study you have to do with your protein, you will choose whether to go with your native page or with your SDS page. So this was about native page. So now coming to the stacking and the resolving gels in SDS page. So like I mentioned before, we have two parts in a gel. We can see here, this is the stacking gel and this is the resolving gel or the running gel. So the stacking gel is where you add the samples. These are the wells which are present. That is the trough where you add your samples, individual samples in individual wells. So once you add it, like we saw before, all the proteins in your samples will be in random in the solution. So we have to first get it into a stack. We have to get it into a proper line together. So it's like, getting, like if there is a race, then it's like making all the participants stand in the front line together, not like few of them are ahead, few of them are behind. It's not like that. Then definitely there will be discrepancies in your resolving gel. So we want all the proteins to start in the single line so that it will be run and resolved more neatly in your resolving gel. So we add the sample here and then it runs in your stacking gel where the pH is 6.8. So it runs here and comes into the front line over here. So once it reaches this line, all the proteins reach at a single line, then they start running into the resolving gel and slowly start separating according to their size. So in your stacking gel, they will not separate according to their size. They will all travel together and come and form a single linear line. In after entering the resolving gel, they will slowly start separating. Your smaller proteins will run faster and your larger proteins will run much slower relative to the smaller one. So you run your proteins because they are negatively charged in case of SDS gel, or in other cases as well, they are usually negatively charged. But SDS helps in imparting more negative charge so that it runs faster. So in case of your negatively charged, they run towards your positively charged anode. So we can see the differences here between stacking and your separating or resolving or running gel, all are the same. So your stacking gel, a stacking gel is a gel with lower concentration of polyacrylamide. Yeah. So other than these differences, the stacking gel will also be usually 5% acrylamide, whereas your resolving gel can start from 5%, 7%. It usually starts from 7%, and you can make it up until 15% also. So you have your 7% gels, you have your 8%, 10%, 12%, 15%, and in some cases, if you want like really small molecular weight, you can also go higher than 15%. But usually we run around from 7 to 12% gels. So your stacking gel is only 5%, so it has very less concentration of acrylamide that concentrates and stacks the sample into a narrow band before it enters the separating gel in the electrophoresis. It has lower percentage of acrylamide. It focuses on concentrating and stacking the proteins into a tight band. Like I said, they will all form a single line or a single band at the end, then preparing them for the entry into the separating gel. It's like giving all the proteins equal opportunity, equal space, equal distance to start from. So preparing them for entry into the separating gel. Then larger pore size enables rapid movement of the proteins and helping them concentrate at the interface of the stacking and the resolving gel. Then coming to your resolving gel or your separating gel. A separating gel is a gel made with a higher concentration of polyacrylamide that helps in separating the molecules based on their size charge in the gel electrophoresis. Then it has a higher percentage when compared to your stacking, and the percentages can increase depending on the size you want to run. This results in a finer matrix for better resolution of separated proteins. Then facilitate it also facilitates the separation of proteins based on their size as they migrate through the gel. So the smaller pore size restricts the movement of the proteins, promoting the separation based on the molecular weight. So this is the basic difference between your stacking gel and your separating gel. So coming to the pH, the different pH of your stacking and resolving gel also plays a role in the separation. So in SDS page, it is crucial for concentrating the proteins in a narrow band before separation. So the lower pH, like I said, the stacking has a pH of 6.8. So the lower pH of the stacking gel causes glycine. So the components of your running buffer is tris, glycine, and SDS. And your gel is made with tris buffer. So the totally all the components present in the SDS page is tris, glycine, and SDS. So the lower pH of the stacking gel causes the glycine to migrate slowly, creating a voltage discontinuity that forces the protein into a tight band. So your glycine basically kind of sandwiches your protein so that they all, form a tight band, so that they can all form a linear narrow band before entering into the resolving gel. So this stacking effect ensures all the proteins enter the resolving gel at the same time. So it's giving everybody the same start time to enter into the resolving gel, so that there are no discrepancies further. So your resolving gel, you have a higher pH, that is 8.8 pH. So this will lead to a sharper, more defined band during separation. So other than this, the stacking gel low pH than the resolving gel. The lower pH causes the glycine to be largely uncharged. So when your glycine is uncharged, it runs behind your sample, so it will help in stacking your sample tightly. As a result, glycine moves slower than the chloride ions, and in the electric field, the proteins which are negatively charged due to SDS are trapped between these two friends, creating a concentrated stack of narrow. So basically, there is a sandwich of your glycine and your protein, that is your negatively charged proteins and chloride. So it will become sandwiched between these two friends, and it will become tightly packed to a very thin, neat line. Then your resolving gel has a higher pH of 8.8. So at this pH, the glycine becomes negatively charged. So because it was neutrally charged in your stacking gel, it was running it was running after your sample. But in case of your resolving gel, now your pH has become more alkaline, so your glycine gets negatively charged, and it moves much faster, allowing the proteins to separate based on their size and charge as they migrate through the resolving gel. Now, the purpose of stacking is to basically form a uniform front for all the proteins to start with, and it is for achieving good resolution in SDS page. So it's simple, right? If every protein starts together, then the separation will be only based on the charge and size. Based on how small the protein is, it will travel faster. Based on how large the protein is, it will travel slower. But if, if in the beginning itself there is a distance between the proteins, um, imagine if like you have this big sample sitting here, and smaller, and they're all random, larger molecular, smaller molecular, everything is mixed together. So there will be few smaller molecular weights of the same protein at this end of the sample, and then few smaller molecular weight at this end of the sample. So when they enter into the running gel, due to that initial difference in the distance, the running will also be different. So you will get sort of a smear instead of a nice crisp band. So to avoid this, we need your stacking gel. So it will give us better resolution. That means it will give us very neat and crisp bands without smudge or smear of the protein. So if the proteins were to enter the resolving gel at different points, their bands would be smeared and difficult to interpret. So the stacking gel ensures that all proteins begin their separation from a single narrow starting point, resulting in sharper and more distinct bands. So that's what they are saying. So if you start everybody together, then based on their different sizes, they will go neatly further. All small proteins of the same size will go together instead of lagging because of the different distances which would have been there in the beginning if you would have not used proper stacking. So that is the reason it is also important to ensure that you maintain the size of the stacking. So typically it is maintained for a length of around 1 to 1.5 centimeter at least minimum, so that by the time it travels from your well to your resolving front, everything will be neatly stacked and compact. Otherwise it will be smudgy and it will make a smear in your gel. So that was about the stacking and different pH of the stacking gel and the resolving gel, and what was the perfect of the purpose of the stacking and how it helps in getting good resolution. So this is what we discussed, the differences between the stacking gel and the separating gel. So this is the basic setup of the vertical electrophoresis, that is your SDS page, which is usually run like this. So you have your buffer tank, you have your cassette in which your gels are placed, and you have your wells, which is made using a comb. So we load the samples here and then they start running in the stacking. So that is the reason we also run stacking at a lower voltage than resolving, because we need to give time for the proteins to pack compactly. Excuse me. Just a second. Okay. So yeah. So that is how we run stacking at a lower voltage than the resolving. Stacking is usually run at 80 volts and resolving can be run anywhere between 100 to 120 volts. So once your protein, like it'll take 15-20 minutes for your proteins to move along the stacking and reach the resolving. So once you see that your proteins, your samples have entered your resolving gel, then you can increase the voltage so that they start running properly in your resolving. So that is the basics of this. And does anybody have any doubt? We can take a 5 minute breather. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Till now, whatever we discussed, uh, what's happening? Okay, yeah. So, if anybody has any doubt, I can take any questions right now. Okay, if not, we can proceed further. Yeah. So, let me know, okay, anytime if you have any questions or any doubts. Then next is beta mercaptoethanol. So beta mercaptoethanol is a reducing agent. It is similar to another agent like DTT, and it is used in SDS page to break the disulfide bonds. So your reducing agents basically break the disulfide bridges between your peptides. So as we know, SDS is a reducing environment, so we run proteins in their linear form, that is the denatured form. Like in the previous case I showed you a picture where there were two peptides attached with each other, so mostly they will be attached with disulfide bonds. So these disulfide bridges should be broken so that each protein will run on its own in its denatured form. So for this purpose, we use beta mercaptoethanol. So this is in the sample preparation dye, that is in your lamelli buffer, we add beta mercaptoethanol. So beta mercaptoethanol is used in SDS page to break the disulfide bonds. And the primary reason for using SDS is to impart negative charge to the proteins, ensuring they migrate towards the positive electrode during electrophoresis. So SDS denatures the protein, disrupts their negative charge, allowing it to bind to the protein in a constant ratio, effectively giving all the proteins similar charge. So when you first break the disulfide bond, it also helps for the SDS to bind properly to the entirety of the protein, so that it binds in the appropriate ratio, that is your protein to SDS ratio, equally to all the proteins, so that all of them are imparted negative charge in a similar ratio. So beta mercaptoethanol reduces the disulfide bonds further to unfold the protein and allow the SDS to bind more effectively. But it is SDS that provides the negative charge. So beta mercaptoethanol does reduce the proteins by breaking the disulfide bonds, and it also helps in binding of the SDS more effectively. But the charge is given by SDS only, not by beta mercaptoethanol or BME. So, beta mercaptoethanol or BME is also considered to be toxic, and it has fumes when you open the container. So it should be handled with care and in a well ventilated area, and it is preferable to use a fume hood if you have one. So do not inhale these kind of compounds. They are volatile in nature and inhalation can be toxic. So this was about the beta mercaptoethanol and SDS and how beta mercaptoethanol allows effective binding of SDS. Then other than this, we also have DTT. Like I said, it is also another reducing agent. So its function is similar to BME. So DTT is dithiothriotol. It also reduces the disulfide bonds. So both are reducing agents, your DTT and your BME. So they break the disulfide bonds in the proteins, often used in SDS page to denature the proteins and allow better separation based on their molecular weight. So like DTT, BME can cleave disulfide bonds, exposing the sulfhydryl groups in the proteins. Then other than that, ammonium persulfate, as we discussed, is a strong oxidizing agent. It is used for polymerization, reaction initiation, and it is different from DTT. TEMED is a catalyst and tris-HCl is a buffer. So tris-HCl buffer is commonly used in electrophoresis because it maintains the pH. It is a buffer system, and it maintains a specific pH during the process but does not have the ability to reduce any disulfide bonds. Its only function is to maintain pH. Then DTT is used in various techniques, including protein analysis, reducing disulfide bonds in proteins to facilitate their separation and analysis in PAGE, and DNA manipulation, so protecting thiol groups in the DNA, preventing dimerization, and improving the efficiency of DNA coupling reactions. It is also used in cell lysis. So DTT is also used in cell lysis during for particularly sperm cells due to their high concentration of disulfide bonds in their membranes. So these are various other uses of DTT. So next topic is the zwitterionic form. So a Zwitter ion is basically a neutral form of the protein. That is, it has both negative and positive charge, and its net charge is neutral. So a Zwitter ion is a molecule that has both positive and negative charges, but it is overall electrically neutral. So for proteins or amino acids, the isoelectric point, that is the pi, is the pH at which the protein has no charge. That is, it has both positive and negative charges, but the net charge is neutral. It is zero. So it at this pH, the molecule exists in its zwitterionic form. So the positively charged amino group, that is the amine group NH3 plus, and the negatively charged group is the carboxyl group in an amino acid, that is your COO minus. So the side chains may also contribute to some charge depending on the protein, but mostly it is due to amine and carboxyl groups. So based on every protein's net charge, including the side chains, at every protein at one particular pH will be in a net neutral state. So this state is called as zwitterion state, and that particular pH for that particular protein is its isoelectric point. So the pH conditions, if the pH is less than the isoelectric point, that is if it is acidic, the protein is positively charged because there are more H plus ions. And then if the pH is equal to the isoelectric point, the protein is neutral, that is, it is in zwitterionic form. And if the pH is higher than the isoelectric point of the protein, that is, if it's in basic environment, it is negatively charged. So this is your cation of your amino acid or protein at low pH. At isoelectric point, it will be in zwitterionic form, and at higher pH, it will be in its anionic form. So this is about the zwitterionic state of a molecule in negative, positive, overall neutral, and low and high pH. So what exactly is isoelectric point? So the isoelectric point of a protein is the pH at which the protein has no net charge, meaning the positive and negative charges on the amino acid residues balance each other out. So like we discussed in case 1, if pH is less, the environment is more acidic, higher H plus concentration, and it leads to protonation of the ionizable groups. So the net charge becomes positive. Therefore, the protein also becomes positively charged. In case of higher pH, that is alkaline or basic condition, the environment is more basic, that is lower H plus concentration. So deprotonation occurs, especially of the acidic residues. So the proteins become net negatively charged. So the entire protein is now negative. So the movement in an electric field. So since the movement is always between the opposites, a positively charged molecule moves towards cathode and a negatively charged molecule moves towards anode. So if the protein's pi is 6.1, for example, and the buffer pH is 4, that is, the pH is lower than the isoelectric point of the protein, so which means it is positively charged now, and a positively charged protein will migrate towards cathode, that is, towards the negative terminal in an applied electric field. So this is how you can determine. So first you should know the pi of the protein, then the pi of the buffer, and then decide whether it becomes positively charged or negatively charged at the end. And if it's a positively charged proteins, it will move towards the cathode, which is a negative terminal. And if it is a negatively charged protein, it will move towards anode, which is a positive terminal. So this was about it. And you can see here, with increasing pH, alkalinity increases, and if this is the isoelectric point, there is no net charge here, and if you go this side, it will be negatively charged, and if you go this side, it will be positively charged. So next is refractometers. So refractometers are primarily used in moving boundary electrophoresis. So it is also known as Tiselius electrophoresis, and it is used to detect separated components. So in this method, a solution in a U-shaped tube. So we have a U-shaped tube like this, and we have the buffer solution here, and we have a solution that contains a mixture before electrophoresis, that is positive, negative, positive A, B, C, etc. And then once you start the electrophoresis, they separate based on their charges, and a pure negative will come on the anode side, and a pure positive will come on the cathode side. So in this method, a solution in a U-shaped tube is subjected to an electric field, and the movement of the charged molecules is monitored by measuring the changes in the refractive index of the solution. So basically this changes or this difference in the refractive index is measured by an instrument that is nothing but the refractometer. Then because of changes in the purity of the charge, sorry, because of the changes in the purity of the charge separated solutions, the refractive index will eventually change. So this change is then detected by the refractometers, and this is how we monitor the movement of charged molecules in the U-shaped tube under an electric field. So, moving boundary electrophoresis, this technique separates molecules based on their charge and size as they move through a solution under an electric field. The role of refractometer is to measure the refractive index of the solution. As charged molecules in the solutions migrate, they alter the refractive index of the solution. So this allows the refractometer to detect the presence and movement of different components in the given solution. So distinguishing from other types of electrophoresis, while refractometers are used in moving boundary electrophoresis, they are not typically used in gel electrophoresis. So here your solution is being separated based on the charge. The components in the solution is separated, so it is not a gel electrophoresis, where visual detection methods like staining are more common. So this was about the refractometers and its use in moving boundary electrophoresis. Then the yeah, does anybody have any doubt? Any questions? Anything? Slide is not visible. Since when? Is it visible or is it not visible, guys? Is the slide visible? Okay, someone said it was not visible. Okay, I'm resharing it again, anyways. Okay, yeah, so like I said, if there is any issue like that, please let me know over the mic because see, I might see this at different times, so you might miss many slides. Okay, I hope it's visible. I don't know, somebody has said it was not. Okay, so just let me know over the mic, okay, if it's not visible. I will check it at that time. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah, so the next is to determine which weight of the protein will move faster and what percentage of gel, and how we can effectively use different percentages of gel to have a proper resolution and separation of proteins in sharp, crisp bands. So, to determine in which condition a 66 kilodalton protein will run furthest in a given time, we must first consider two factors. One is the voltage and one is the percentage of the acrylamide in the resolving gel. So, voltage is simple. Basically, if you have a higher voltage, the migration speed will be more. And in case of percentage of the gel, it is inverse. If you have a higher percentage of gel, the migration will be slower because you will have smaller pore size. And if you have a lower percentage of gel, you will have larger pores and less resistance, and therefore your proteins will move faster, especially larger proteins like 66 kilodalton. So a higher percentage of gel will create a tighter mesh which will slow down this larger proteins by running running faster. So just remember, high voltage, faster migration, low percentage of gel, faster migration. So if it is 100 volts electric field and you have a 10% gel, the moderate voltage and large pores will give good migration. And if it is a 15% gel with 100 volts, uh, here we have a higher percentage of gel which has smaller pores. So even though we have a moderate voltage, the higher percentage of gel will slow down the larger proteins. And then if it is 12% also, it is in an intermediate gel percentage. So this will also have a moderate migration when compared to a 10% gel. So in case of at 80 volts and 10%, even though the percentage is 10% here, the voltage is lower. So lower voltage will lead to slower migration despite larger pore size. So depending on the size and depending on the resolution you want, you can play around with the sizes and the gel percentages and the voltage. But however, for gel percentages, there is usually a standard that for the given range of protein you should properly use, like optimally you have to use these percentages. So if you have a protein which you want to detect, which ranges between 4 to 40 kilodalton, this is very small size, so you have to go for a 20% gel. So like the lower end, like if you have to determine for like 4 to maybe say 10 or 15, so you have to go below 15% gel. So the highest resolution you will get for a high molecular weight is 40 in a 20% gel. If you want higher than 40, then you have to go to lower percent. So the range you can see in a 20% gel is 4 to 40. Same way, in a 15% gel, a good resolution range will come for proteins which lie between 12 to 45 kilodaltons. And for 10 to 70 kilodalton proteins, you can run a 12.5% or a 12% gel. And proteins above 70, you have to go for a lower percent gel. Only then you will have your bands migrating towards the anode. Otherwise, they will all be near the dye front in the beginning. So in a 10% gel, you can easily resolve most of the proteins ranging from 15 to 100 kilodaltons. And if you want to go higher than 100 kilodaltons, then you have to go to 8% gel. So in an 8% gel, you can see proteins up to 200 kilodaltons. If you want proteins which are higher molecular weight, more than 200 kilodaltons, you can also use a 7% gel. So that time you have to run the gels a longer time, you have to adjust the voltage accordingly, and then if you're further going to western blot, you have to also appropriately adjust the western blot transfer time. So this is a standard setting. So for this range of protein, this is the percentage of page gel that we generally make. Then this is how your gel looks. So after gel running, we can go either for staining of the gel or we can go for western blot. So here, since we're talking about gels, so we will go for staining of the gel. So staining also can be done with different. Most commonly we do either Kumasi staining or we do silver staining. So after running proteins in the SDS page, staining is required to visualize the separated protein bands. So Kumasi Brilliant Blue R250 is the most commonly used dye for post-electrophoretic protein staining. This binds to the protein in a non-covalent interaction, mainly ionic and van der Waals forces, and it appears as blue bands wherever the proteins are present. So you can see wherever the proteins are present, the dye has bound to it, and you can visualize it basically with your naked eye. You have crisp, neat protein bands. So it offers good sensitivity, that is approximately 0.1 to 0.5 micrograms of protein. So you can go up to like even zero point 0.1 microgram, which is 100 nanograms of proteins, can also be detected by Comasi Brilliant Blue. If you want further more sensitivity, if you want to go more at nanogram level, less than 100 nanograms, then you can also go for silver nitrate staining, which is more sensitive and will detect very tiny amount, nanoscale levels of protein. So bromophenol blue is generally used in the tracking dye and it is not used for staining. And it is present in the lamellae buffer, that is your sample loading buffer. And ethidium bromide is used for nucleic acids, that is for staining the nucleic acids. Ethidium bromide, as you know, it is an detecting agent, and it will go and bind between the nucleotides in the DNA or RNA, and it will illuminate upon UV visualization. So ETBR is for nucleic acids. Then crystal violet. Crystal violet is sometimes used for membrane staining or total protein stains, but it is not commonly used in case of SDS page staining. So for SDS page, we generally go for Kumasi Brilliant Blue, or we go for silver staining. Next is PAS staining. So PAS staining is periodic acid shift staining, which detects polysaccharides in the tissue sample. So which this is prevalent in glycoproteins, mainly uh, primarily highlights these molecules in the tissues of your animals or your human biopsies. If you want to see any sorts of glycogen reserves, glycoproteins, polysaccharides accumulation within the tissues or cells, then we go for periodic acid shift staining, that is PAS staining. So basically, it is immunohistochemistry or histochemistry. Uh, since we are not using any antibodies, it is histochemical staining, where it detects polysaccharides and carbohydrate rich molecules and the regions in the tissues or cells. So it detects glycoproteins, glycolipids, mucopolysaccharides, and glycogen. So the mechanism is basically periodic acid oxidizes vicinal diols. So you have your diol groups, CHOH groups in your sugars and aldehydes. So it will oxidize these groups, and these aldehydes react with the Schiff reagent, producing a magenta color, a magenta pink color. So you can see that wherever there is glycogen or carbohydrate, any sort of carbohydrate reserves, you can see that it gave a magenta pink staining. That means in that regions there has been accumulation of carbohydrates or glycogen. So this is a staining of gastric signet ring cell carcinoma, and they have done past staining here, and also here you can see esophageal candidiasis. You can see in sort of infection also you can use it for detecting it, and case of liver. So liver, it has lot of glycogen reserve. So when you stain liver tissue, you can see complete staining of the glycogen that is present in magenta by PAS. So liver and glycogen storage disease, you can use PAS to detect more accumulation or less accumulation, whatever in the liver. So this was about the periodic acid shift staining. So this, we are done with the assignment questions now. So if you guys have any doubts, you can ask me regarding the assignment. After that, I'll just discuss a little bit about page and agarose gel electrophoresis. Does anyone have any doubt? Okay, if there is no doubt, I will just briefly go through this, and I have given source links also, so you can also later go through the sources. So electrophoresis. Basically, electrophoresis is a technique that is used to separate macromolecules in a fluid or a gel-based system on their charge, binding affinity, and size under an electric field. It was done in the year 1807 by Ferdinand Frederick Roos, and was the first person to observe electrophoresis. He was from Moscow State University, and anaphoresis is the electrophoresis of negatively charged particles on anions, whereas cataphoresis is electrophoresis of the positively charged ions or cations. So electrophoresis is widely applied in separating and analyzing biomolecules such as proteins, plasmids, RNA, DNA, nucleic acids, etc. So the basic principle behind electrophoresis is that charged macromolecules, when placed in an electric field, move towards either negative or positive electrode based on the charge present on the biomolecule. So nucleic acid have a net negative charge themselves, so they immediately migrate towards the anode. In case of proteins also, if the negative charge is net negative charge is negative, they go towards the anode, or we use reducing conditions and SDS to impart the anionic charge on the proteins. So this technique is also divided based on the way you run it. So there are two types, which is slab electrophoresis and capillary electrophoresis. And capillary electrophoresis is again gel electrophoresis and paper electrophoresis. Slab electrophoresis is zone electrophoresis, immunoelectrophoresis, and isoelectric focusing. These are different types. If you want to know further details, you can go through them. We will discuss about SDS page. So it is uh, separation basically based on the molecular weight, and it is a technique widely used in forensics, genetics, biotechnology, and molecular biology to separate the protein molecules based on their electrophoretic mobility. So we see we have a non-reducing gel and then we have reducing gel. So in case of non-reducing gel, you have all the native forms preserved and everything is it's in oligomeric or native form at higher molecular weight. But once they are reduced, they break, the disulfide bonds are broken, they become monomeric in nature, and then you see their individual molecular weights at lower sizes. So the principle of SDS page states that a charged molecule migrates to the electrode with opposite sign or opposite charged when placed in an electric field. The separation of the charged molecules depends on the relative mobility of the charged species. The smaller molecules migrate faster due to less resistance during the electrophoresis, and the structure and the charge of the proteins also influence the rate of migration. So SDS and polyacrylamide eliminates the influence of structure and charge of the protein because it imparts a net negative charge, and the proteins are separated based on the length of the polypeptide. So the role of SDS is a detergent, and it is used in sample buffer preparation, running buffer, along with some reducing agent. It breaks the disulfide bonds and proteins, disrupting the tertiary structure and linearizing them in their simplest forms. So the basic materials required to run an SDS page is SDS page gel composed of stacking and resolving gels made of polyacrylamide, and then SDS to denature the proteins which is present in the sample buffer and as well as in the running buffer. Then reducing agents like BME or DTT to break the disulfide bonds which is also present in the sample buffer. Then we need an electrophoresis buffer, which is your trisglycine buffer with SDS. It helps maintaining the pH and conductivity. Then we have our protein samples prepared in sample buffer containing SDS. A reducing agent is optional and a tracking dye. So then electrophoresis apparatus we use to apply the electric field, and then we have a staining solution after the gel is run to visualize the protein bands. So this is the setup. This is your gel. So we have two glass plates, a thin plate and a thick plate, which are attached together, and the gel is added in between the plates, which is the gap is 1 mm thickness usually, or you also have 1.5 mm thickness if you want a thicker gel. Then you add the, let me get the pointer. Yeah, so you add the gel in between these two glass plates so that it becomes a nicely even thin layer of gel, and then you place a comb here after adding the stacking. So the comb helps create wells for the sample loading, and once it polymerizes, you put it in the gel holder. This is the gel holder which has electrodes attached to it, and then you put it in this, you put it in the buffer tank, and you attach the electrodes to it and you attach it to the power pack. So then you run it and you can see your samples running from your cathode to anode. So once it is done, you can either stain it directly using Comasi Brilliant Blue or silver staining if you just want to visualize all the bands, or if you want particular protein, if you want to check levels of the protein, or if you want to check the presence of a particular protein, then you will put it for Western blotting, that is transfer into an NC membrane or a PVDF sheet, and then you will add your primary antibody relevant to your protein of interest and then secondary, and then you will visualize it using a visualizing reagent like luminol. So this is about it. So if you want more information, you can go to these source websites. And the applications of SDS page. So the applications of SDS page is basically it is used to measure the molecular weight of the molecules, and it is used to estimate size of a protein, and it is used in peptide mapping. It is used to compare polypeptide composition of different structures, and then it is used to estimate purity of a protein, oligomeric nature of a protein, and it can be further used for Western blotting and to check different protein levels and ubiquitination, etc. It is also used in HIV tests to separate the HIV proteins. It is used to analyze the size and number of polypeptide subunits, and it is also used to check post-translational modifications. So this is how you run it. You load your sample here in your wells, then you add the buffer, then you have your ladder here with standard markings which will have color or it has a stain, so it will help us in checking what molecular weight your protein is of interest. And then you also have multiple bands when you stain it with Kumasi or anything if you want to visualize the entire gel. Then coming to horizontal, so based on the direction of the electrophoresis, we have both horizontal electrophoresis and vertical electrophoresis. So horizontal electrophoresis is done horizontally like this, left to right or right to left, side to side, and vertical is usually SDS page, which is top to bottom. So in your horizontal electrophoresis, we usually run nucleic acids, that is your agarose. And here also we have similar materials that is required, an electrophoretic chamber. Here you see it is different from there. There it was a tank, a vertical tank, and here it's a horizontal tank. And then you have your agarose gel, you have your gel casting tray, running buffer, staining. So here the running buffer is TAE buffer, that is triacetic acid EDTA buffer, and staining dye and a comb, DNA ladders. So here also you will have a DNA ladder which will give you different lengths of DNA standard already present in it. So you can see your interest of nucleic acid or plasmid is of what length corresponding with the ladders. Then we have sample, starting material and loading buffer. Then we have DNAs, RNAs free distilled water because it can degrade your nucleic acids, and then we need a UV transilluminator to visualize it because we will be adding ETBR in the agarose gel. So we have the similar setup here, the gel, and then we place the comb, we have wells and we load the samples there, and we connect the electrodes, we add the buffer, and electrodes are connected to the power pack. And then we run the gel and we visualize it using UV. So basically, first we prepare the gel, we melt the agarose, dissolve it in TAE buffer, and then we add ETBR to it once it reaches a lukewarm temperature. Mix it thoroughly, pour it in the cast, put the comb, allow it to solidify, and then put the gel in the tank, add the running buffer, load the samples, run the gel at a constant voltage until band separation occurs. The sample is made in a tracking die which helps visualize the running, how far your sample has run. And then we visualize the DNA RNA in a UV light box and the analysis is interpreted. So we can see this is your casting tray. This is how you mix the gel agarose and pour it with the comb. Then you add it tracking dye or loading dye into your sample, and you load it in the gel and it runs. You have your DNA ladder here, which shows your from maybe your 10 kb to 1 kb length, different sizes in between. And once you illuminate it with UV or gel documentation system, you can see that your plasmid or DNA of interest is at particular region. You can also do it with again PCR amplified products to check your amplification at different lengths, different amplicons are present. So you will check all these under UV transilluminator. So this is about it, and these are the applications. You can go through it, and this is the source material. You can go through it for further details if you have more doubts or if you want to read more about it. So DNA, it's used for many applications to check whether the size of your plasmid or size of your amplicon, DNA fragments, DNA fingerprinting, crime scenes in forensics, and you know for cloning DNA fragments. For everything we have to use agarose gel to investigate the length of the DNA that has been used. So that is it for this session. If anybody has any doubts, you can ask me, or if you want me to discuss anything else, you can let me know. I will wait for like maybe 10 minutes more. If anybody has any doubt, can go ahead and ask me. If you guys do not have any doubts, you can exit the meeting. Thank you, everybody. You can exit the meeting if there are no more doubts or if there are no questions. Yeah, somebody has raised a hand. Tara, please tell me.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening. Tell me.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah, please tell me.
Ma'am, how can we identify there's a plasmid DNA or genomic DNA using genomic when we done agarose gel analysis? How
Oh,
can we identify distinct bands are which are plasmid or genomic DNA?
okay. So when you run your plasmid, you usually know the length of your plasmid because you have isolated it. So usually maybe it is a 8 kb plasmid or a 7 kb plasmid. So when you run the gel, one second, let me share the screen again. Yeah. So after isolation, when you run it, you can see usually your plasmid will come in three bands, 2 or 3 bands, depending on the integrity of it, whether it's circular or linear or nicked form, or if you use restriction enzymes, you can use particular restriction enzymes to see your complete linear form, and it will give you the exact length of your plasmid. So if you have an 8 kb plasmid, it will exactly come at 8 kb corresponding to your ladder. And if you have genomic impurities, you can easily observe that because genomic DNA usually comes at higher end. So if this is your well, you will have your genomic DNA contamination over here at most close to your well, or within the well also you can see illumination. That means there is genomic DNA contamination. Or if your plasmid is degraded or if your RNA is degraded, you will not get a crisp band like this, you will get a smear. Okay, so that also you can also see whether it's degraded or not. So if you have genomic DNA contamination, you will usually find higher molecular bands other than your molecular weight of your plasmid near your wells. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else? Any doubt?
Uh, mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me.
Acrylamide
Yes.
composite gel, what can you explain it in brief?
Sorry, your voice is actually not very audible. Can you speak a little louder?
Agave,
Yes, yes. Please say.
ma'am, ma'am, I want to know about agave acrylamide composite gel.
Composition. So agarose gel, you add only agarose and you add it in TAE buffer, which is a triacetic acid and EDTA buffer. And acrylamide, you have acrylamide and bisacrylamide, like I said, in 1 is to 30 ratio. You have 1 part bisacrylamide and 29 parts acrylamide. And then in that you also add APS timid tris buffer and you mix it well, timid, and then you add it. That's all. Was that your question? The components of these gels, or is it something else? Hello, Tara?
Ma'am, it is something.
What is it?
Um, ma'am, I'm typing in the chat box.
Yeah, okay.
That's my question.
Yeah, yeah, please. What do you mean by composite gels? You want to know what chemically what acrylamide and agarose are? Is that what you want? Yes, Tara, am I audible? Where is it? Which question is it? I have discussed, I think, almost all the questions. Can you tell me the
Ma'am,
question
let
number?
me stop. Uh,
If you can tell me the question number, I
ma'am,
can check it.
assignment checking assignment first.
First assignment, this only, na? Week 2. This
Please
one,
check in assignment first number. I think second, second assignment. Yes, ma'am.
role of ammonium persulfate. Which one? Which is the question?
Ma'am, question number I think 13 to 14.
13th or 14th? Okay, 13th is regarding the dye. I have discussed it. 14th is what is the oligomeric status of protein molecular weight? Is this the one you want to know?
No, ma'am. I ma'am, just one second.
Yeah,
I'm checking.
yeah, yeah, sure. Is it from the previous assignment?
Actually, Actually, ma'am, the question is if diamond composite gels are used to protein samples of molecular, what molecular weight of something like that question. Actually, I have noted down it because I have
Is it
queries
week
about it, so
2
I
or
know it.
week 3? Are you talking about week 3
I think
assignment?
week three, I think.
So week 3 we will do it in next session. This was for week
Okay, ma'am.
2. But I don't think in week 3 it is there. Week 3 is mostly chromatography, electrophoresis. Okay, no problem. You'll find the exact question and you can mail it to me. I will answer it to you via mail. Okay?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I'll just type my mail ID here if you guys need it. Okay. You can send the question to this mail ID. I will reply to it because I'm not exactly able to understand the question you're asking. If you can find the exact question, I will answer it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Anybody else? Any question? Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can end the session. Thank you all for attending. You can send your queries and questions to this email ID. Note it down. Please note it and copy it. I will also share the presentation and I will also share the recording link of this in the YouTube channel. So you can also look it over there and you can revise, or if you have further doubts after revisiting the video also, you can just mail it to me. Okay. Thank you. Bye everybody.